Today, we're going to have some focus on the deadlift, sumo deadlift, and the straight leg deadlift. So I can explain the difference of the three lifts, the different muscles we target through each of the lift, and also some nice pointers to think about when taking on each lift. Let's start by going through maybe the more common of the three, the regular deadlift, or what we can also refer to as the conventional deadlift. I would say that the deadlift is an essential exercise when you're thinking about building strength into the lower back, hamstrings, and also hip flexors. The thing with deadlift is it's placing quite a lot of stress on the body, especially at higher weights, and it's really important that you have really good understanding of the technique to familiarise yourself with the key teaching points to avoid any mistakes. First of all, I want to teach you what I classify as a deadlift with good technique and some nice points for you to remember when you take it into the gym. The first place I'm going to start with is the position of the feet to make sure you have a good, strong foundation for the lift. You want your feet about hip width apart and the weight of your body spread relatively even through the foot, slightly with the weight distributed to the heel. Second point I'd like to focus on would be the hand position being placed just on the outside of the leg with the reference point of the elbows coming to the same point as the knee, ensuring that the arms are completely straight to ensure tension through the bar. Also at this point, it's recommended that you grip the bar with one hand on the underside, also known as supinated grip, and one hand gripping over the bar, also known as pronated grip. This will help keeping a good grip of the bar, especially when you progress onto using a heavier weight. With both the feet and the arms now in position, it's now time to drop those hips into position where the angle of the knee would be slightly over 90 degrees, while maintaining the position of the bar as close as possible to the shin, or if possible, actually in contact with the shin. From here, you should be aiming to keep your back roughly at 45 degrees or a little less to the ground. Before you are then ready to start the lift, the last important factor is actually the activation of the abdominals, which will play a big role in terms of keeping the upper body much more stable and strong throughout the lift, whilst also maintaining a straight position through the whole of the back. Once you feel as though you're in a confident and comfortable starting position, the lift can begin by straightening the joint until the bar passes the position of the knee. Also, you can think that the angle of the back in comparison to the floor won't alter during this phase of the lift. Once the bar has surpassed the position of the knee, we can now complete the lift by simultaneously straightening the knee and the hip joint, maintaining a position of the bar which is as close as possible to the body. On the downward phase of the lift, you can almost think about repeating the upward phase, but in the opposite way, with bending from the hip joint initially, and then more so from the knee joint once the bar has surpassed the knee on the way down. Now we've gone through the correct starting position, and also the key points throughout the lift, it's also important to have a think about what limiting factors could come into play, and also how they can be potentially solved. It can be a common mistake that people are deadlifting from the ground with a rounded back, and most likely the reason for this is a lack of mobility in the hip. Ways that we can get around this issue could be by taking a slightly wider foot stance, or by raising the height of the bar with a starting point with platforms underneath the weight plates. Of course, this is a good short-term fix, but in the long run, it won't solve the issue of the hip mobility. An extra focus should be placed on increasing the mobility in both the hamstrings and also hip flexors. We will now take a look into why a certain person would adapt the lift according to their different strengths of the active muscles. A good example of this would be someone who's got a really solid, well-developed posterior chain in terms of back, hamstrings and glutes, would lift with almost straight legs and also a horizontal back, which can be known as stooping. It's common that this approach is used by powerlifters, but is most definitely not recommended for beginners, purely for the fact that the load on the lower back is quite high. In comparison to this, someone who is stronger in the quadriceps is more likely to lift with a much more straighter or vertical back and driving the exercise slightly more so from the legs. This is also a typical way that we'd lift something heavy up from the ground, and also therefore it's making a slightly more functional way to deadlift. After talking you through the correct way to deadlift and the things you should focus on, we'll now go through a couple more points of where people can go wrong. It can be seen that the lift is executed with the round back, of which places much load directly on the lower back in a bad way, and it can definitely lead to injury. Another common one to look for is the knee joint extending too quickly. Many can have a position where the back is held at an inclined position, but as soon as the bar lifts off the floor, the glutes come up and the back falls into an almost horizontal position. In a case like this, it's also common that the bar drifts out from the legs, which is adding extra strain on the lower back. We've now covered most of the do's, the don'ts, and also the things to keep an eye out so far. So now we're going to move on and get you more familiar with a couple of the other techniques of the deadlift that are also essential. Okay, so let's have some focus now on the sumo deadlift. The sumo style was actually developed and used by competitive lifters to utilise the strength of the quadriceps. This technique has less load on the back, but still not recommended for beginners or inexperienced lifters. The foot position for this is much wider than in conventional deadlift, with the feet falling just on the inside of the weight plates and the foot position angled at 45 degrees. We went through the conventional deadlift, So we bend down, take the bar with the cross grip, pull the bar right up into the legs, whilst keeping the calves and the back as vertical as possible. Same as with the regular deadlift, it's really important to get those abdominal muscles activated for the upper body stabilisation and also keeping the back naturally straight. Whilst holding that good starting position again, you can go ahead by starting the lift by straightening the knee joint and finishing the lift by extending the hip joint once the bar has passed the knees. Remember here again, it's really important to keep the bar as close as possible to the body to maintain control through the whole out of the movement. As with the regular deadlift, the downward phase is done by bending from the hip and then from the knee once the bar has passed just below the knee joint. For the sumo deadlift, it can also be recommended to use shoes that have got good grip so the feet don't slip, and in turn making sure that you don't drop the weights on your toes. The sumo style advantages can also be evident due to the fact that the quadriceps, which are one of the largest and strongest muscles in the body, are activated as a synergist. Glad that you've enjoyed learning about the conventional deadlift and the sumo deadlift, but now time to focus on the last variation, the straight leg deadlift. A straight leg deadlift is more of an extreme form of deadlift because the movement only takes place around the hip joint, and the final position is also limited by the range of the motion in the hip joint. With the straight leg deadlift, you start by lifting the bar off the ground as you normally would do with the conventional deadlift, but this time you've got overgrip on both hands. Once you're in the top position, you can start by having a slight bend in the knee. From there, you start by running the bar down the legs, only bending from the hip joint, pushing the glutes back and also holding the knee in the same position. You should stop the movement once you feel as though you've reached maximum stretch in both the hamstrings and the hip flexors. And from there, you can come back up, keeping the bar as close as possible to the legs and also coming back to your same starting position. With the straight leg deadlift, I'd suggest that you can use half the amount of weight as you normally would do with the conventional deadlift and focus more so on a good connection with the hamstring and also feel the stretch. As with the other techniques, a common mistake of the lift will be around your back. We also see a lot of people deadlifting with two straight legs, which can also lead to injuries in the knee. Okay, today we've been going through maybe one of the most intimidating exercises in the gym, but don't worry, we've got you covered with 5 simple steps that will get you deadlifting like a pro in no time.